Good morning from the Utah Valley University Office for Global Engagement. I am your host, Baldomero Lago, and today we are celebrating International Modern Language Day. What a great day it is for all of us to be together and to have this great panel with wonderful experts and professionals on the field. The theme of the day, or the theme for this day today, is fostering multilingualism for inclusion in education and society. Thus, encourage us to support multilingualism and the other use of mother tongues, both at school and in everyday life. This is essential because when 40% of the world's inhabitants do not have access to education in the language they speak or understand best, it hinders their learning as well as their access to heritage and cultural expressions. This year, special attention is being paid to multilingual education from early childhood so that the children, their mother tongue is always an asset. During this session today, feel free to ask questions in the Facebook comments window. If time permits, I will address a select few. For those of you that are actually following these proceedings on your cell phone, make sure that you flip the page so you can see all the panelists, and you will see both interpreters on the top corners of your phone. So you'll be able to follow the proceedings. Today we have four experts and that they understand and live well this topic. We have Dr. Sajal, an assistant professor of computer sciences, also Dr. Michael Ballard, an assistant professor of American Sign Language in the Department of Languages and Cultures. Then we have Ms. Leone Saaga, program director of Pacific Islanders Initiative. And also we have Ms. Meg Singer, a program director of Native American Initiative. At this panel, we will have Dr. Sayeed Sajal be the moderator, and he will be introducing everyone, or maybe everyone should introduce themselves briefly, and then he will proceed by asking some questions. So our moderator today is Dr. Sajal. Welcome to everyone, and we have until 11:50 this morning to discuss or celebrate better this topic today. Good morning, Dr. Sajal.
Yeah, thank you so much, Baldomero. It was a very great day for me because it's my great honor today to have all of you at this event. So first of all, I want to thank you, Utah Valley University, to support and to arrange this to promote this important diversity and inclusiveness. I'm privileged to have Baldomero from Office of Engaged Learning for helping to host the event, and the panelists Michael, Leone, and Meg to join us. And thanks Dog and Chip for uh, working as an interpreter for Michael. And also thank to Amy from Global Engagement, Brian for Language and Cultures, and also want to thank to Official Inclusion at Utah Valley University. And I also want to thank Utah Valley University and the local community and the global community who are supporting this event to make it happen. So thanks to all who joined this program today, locally and globally, because we are doing here for virtually because of COVID-19. I also thank to all the media people who are here and across the border who are featuring this event. Thanks to all the student organizations, faculties, friends, relatives, and this community who inspire and motivate us directly and indirectly. Especially, I want to thank my family who inspire and motivate me for all this time. And today I want to share a brief history of this event, International Mother Language Day. And I started organizing this event since 2016 from North Dakota. And every year I try to organize this event to promote diversity and inclusiveness. And last year I joined Utah Valley University, and this is the first time I'm organizing in Utah. And to talk about the brief history, you all know the present nations of Pakistan and Bangladesh are part of undivided India during British colonial rule. After the partition of India in 1947, Pakistan has two parts of East Pakistan and West Pakistan. Before the liberation war in 1971, Pakistan has two parts which are like East and West, and East Pakistan is now in Bangladesh. And on February 21st, 1952, dozens of students and political activists were killed when the Pakistani police were forced open fire on Bengali protesters who were demanding equal status for their native tongue, Bengali. The massacre occurred near Dhaka Medical College and Ramana Park in Dhaka, Bangladesh. The makeshift monument was erected on February 23rd by the students of University of Dhaka and other educational institute, but soon demolished on February 26 by the Pakistani police force. The language movement gained momentum, and after a long struggle, Bengali was given equal status with Urdu, which was the language for West Pakistan. To commemorate the deed, and the Shohid Minar was designed and built by Hamidur Rahman, uh, a Bangladesh sculptor in collaboration with Novera Ahmed. The monument stood until the Bangladesh Liberation War in 1971, when it was demolished, and completely during Operation Searchlight. After Bangladesh gained independence, it was rebuilt. And if you see my background, that is the monument I am talking about. So there's the monument that was built and again after 1971. And at present, all national mourning and cultural and other activities held each year regarding February 21st has been centered on Shohid Minar, and you can see on my background. The enormous design include half circular column to symbolize the mother and her fallen sons standing on the monument's central dia, and red sun shining behind. So you can see the red circular, that is the symbolic for shining sun. And November 17, 1999, UNESCO first announced this day, and from 2000, the day was celebrated at International Mother Language Day, and that's why we are celebrating International Mother Language Day every year. And I want to show you an video to share some of the history of it. It will take a few minutes to watch. I think this is the short history and about the International Mother Language Day. And I want to ask from all of you for 30 seconds to be quiet for 30 seconds to respect them who sacrificed their life. And I'll count the time and let you know when it's up. Yeah, time is up. Thank you so much to showing them respect and and we are the only nation, Bangladesh, who sacrificed their life for the language. And now I want to introduce all of you, all the panelists, and give them some time to introduce themselves. First one to go with Leone.
Aloha mai kako. I'm going to introduce myself in Hawaiian, so there is a brief translation in our chat. So let me just post that. No leila velina o wau no hoi o Leone malia Saaga. No ka ahupua o hauula ma ka moku o ko'olauloa ma ka moku puni o ahu ma Hawaii nei. Au I keia manawa he Hawaii, Samoa, Chinese, German au. Ua noho wau ma'anei ma Utah no 'umikumakamahi mau makahiki. O wau noho wau ma Eagle Mountain I keia manawa ano. O wau noho I ke alaka'i no ka papahana no na po'e paki pika ma ka hui no na po'e oiwi na maoli ma keia kula nui nei o Utah Valley University. Hau'oli wau e iki a'u ko. Mahalo.
So much for your nice introductions, Leone. Now I want to go with Michael, and Michael is talking through using interpreter, and now he's introduced himself.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Michael Ballard. I'm a faculty member and director of programs here at Utah Valley University for the American Sign Language and Deaf Studies program. It's great to be with all of you this morning. Thank you for allowing me to spend some time with you and talk about languages and cultures. I have been deaf since the age of 1, and so that has been my life experience. My native language is American Sign Language, as I'm using today. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to display that for you, to show you and talk a little bit about the struggles of our community, talk a little bit about the accomplishments of our community, and how using American Sign Language can be a benefit for everybody in communication. Thanks, it's great to be here.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for your nice introductions. Now I want to go with Meg Singer. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you so much. I'm going to introduce myself in Denebizad, and then I will introduce myself in English. So, Yat e abine, Meg Singer Yenishye, Besh Bechae Nishle, Ki Ani Bashishchi, Ashihi Dashiche, Bilagana Dashanale, Akot Ego Dene Atsan Nishli. Hello, my name is Meg Singer, and I'm from the Hard Hat clan, born for Towering House clan. So in little explanation of that is the Hard Hat clan is the German people, and that is what my mom's clan is, and then Towering House is my dad's clan. And I'm just super happy to be here today with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meg. And now we have some panel discussion for all the panelists, and I'll ask a few questions and we'll discuss those questions and we'll learn from those discussions. So one of the question in my mind is like, why language is so important to us? So I can start with my vision and my like idea, like why language is so important to me. Because I born in Bangladesh and I came to US and several years ago. And when I came, I was in different language environment. And I know, like in 1952, our nation sacrificed their lives to protect our language. And Bengali is one of the languages. It's very like emotional, and a lot of different like he and she. Maybe you can respect with you have three different you we can talk about. So if you respected you is different you. If your friend is different you, and if you're below your subordinate different you. So that means there's a lot of emotional aspect of this language. And I started this event in 2016, and every year I organize this event with the help of local community and like people like you who are enthusiastic and helpful to make it happen. And language, without language we cannot communicate. And even like everybody have their own language, even the animals have their own language. So that means like without language even we cannot live, even like an oxygen. So that's why it's so important to me. And we should know each other language and culture. And that's why I am trying to help each other to make it happen, to make it important to all of you. And that's my view. And I want to go with Meg. Can you share your view why language is important to you?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think language is so connected to our history as a people. The Navajo people have lived in the Four Corners area since time immemorial. Our language is something that, is uh, teaches our history. It's our outlook. It's how we, view the world. It's how we view each other. And that was under attack since colonialism happened. The mere idea of speaking language was thought of something as, bad, evil, negative. And so now the importance of culture is to not only continue on the traditions of, my ancestors from, the beginning of time, but also it's empowering to fight against large forces that just don't want you to speak, your language.
Thank you so much, Meg. Now I want to go with Leone. Can you share your view?
Hi, mahalo. Just like Meg said, yes, it's important, at least for me as well, because it connects me to who I am as a Hawaiian who grew up in Hawaii. And most of the world knows Hawaii. But what is Hawaii to them? From my point of view, the way I see it is Hawaii is this fabulous destination, vacation place to be, where you have beautiful hula dancers in shiny grass cellophane skirts with music and dance. And it happens to be, at least when tourism boomed in Hawaii, the music was what we termed hapahaole, which is half half. So half English, half Hawaiian. And then it kind of turned into mostly just English. And so my Hawaiian identity, it turned into a shell. It turned into a tourist attraction. And so I'm grateful for those forefathers who, as far back as just before the 70s, because of land disputes and because of an interest in Hawaiian language in the university started, this renaissance started with Hawaiian. And so I'm grateful for that, because the culture is no longer, it still is, yes, but we've come so far. The language is thriving. It's a new Hawaiian, but it's still Hawaiian. It's thriving now. And I'm grateful to have been a part of that. So for me, the importance is to be connected to our history and to who we are, instead of the shell that, at least for me as a Kanaka Maoli or a Hawaiian native, it's no longer a shell for me anymore. I know who I am. I can understand my stories, and I can understand the words to the music, which is so empowering and just so much more beautiful to understand. At the same time, it can be cringy because now that I understand and I watch certain movements in hula, sometimes there's a big question onto what they're doing, but that's the importance of the language for me. Mahalo.
Thank you, Leone. Thanks so much. Now I want to go with Dr. Ballard. Can you please explain why language is so important to you?
Sure. Thanks, Sayeed. Language for me is a measurement of my humanity. It's everything to me. It is not only, it only provides connectivity with the human family, but it's also a disconnect of language means a disconnect from my human family as well. The importance of language can't be understated. It is a measure of accessibility to my world. It allows me to both direct communication to people and also incidental communication to people around me. And how that happens for me is completely and totally through my eyes. My accessibility comes from the things that I see, from the language that I view, from the people I interact with. Spoken language for me, therefore, doesn't have the same value. I don't process language that way. It doesn't help me. And so it's not part of who I am. Spoken language doesn't make up my identity. A visual language makes up my identity. There are severe consequences then, physical and mental consequences, when a verbal language is prioritized over a visual language for a deaf person. Our community is experiencing a great deal of language deprivation. That's language, as has been said by others, is how we build our communications and our connections with one another. To have that removed or not have access to it is incredibly challenging for people. It's important that everybody has access to language so they can make those connections and build those relationships. Thanks, Sayeed.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael. I think the next question I have in my mind. So we all know language and cultures, those are correlated, those are integrated. You cannot live without one. So you cannot live culture without language. You cannot live language without culture. So it's very, very important questions. How is language important? How is language important to culture? And I want to direct that questions to Michael again. Can you please explain that questions, Michael?
Yeah, thanks. This is an excellent question. Thank you, Sayeed. Really, it's impossible to divorce language from culture, isn't it? You can't divorce culture from language either. They're inseparable, really. They belong to one another. And to try and do that means part of our soul is missing. A part of who we are is removed when that happens. When the human soul is missing parts of itself, we incur challenges in our life, don't we? When the language is missing, it impacts our culture. When culture is missing, it impacts language. And that in turn impacts who we are, our identity as a person, as a human being. It makes it very difficult for us to discover ourselves and to find our place in the world. The viability of language and the longevity of a people really reside in the knowledge that language and culture cannot possibly be separated. They can't be divorced from one another.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sayeed.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Michael, for your excellent explanations. I really like that. So now I want to go with Meg. Can you share why language is important to culture?
Yeah, I love what Michael said, Dr. Ballard said about, language. And I feel like with someone who is learning the language after, generations of people speaking Navajo, solely to each other and talking to one another, and then to be disconnected from that. I'm one generation from not knowing my language fluently. And so not knowing the language fluently it made it harder to access culture, because it's not just miscommunication or not being able to communicate. It is learning those ways of thinking. So it's not saying that Navajo people think differently than like mainstream of what you in English, but if you know a different language and your whole society is built around this language, and then you have these powerful forces that are telling you, you can't speak your language or else you're going to get in trouble or you're going to get killed. There brings a lot of shame with that. And so I think in my generation, revitalizing the language and talking about those things, like the shame that comes from even, knowing that, I think that there is a lot more healing in culture now. And that happens whenever we speak, the language. And I feel like our culture is, because we're in such need of, we're revitalizing it and bringing it to make it more accessible to people. We're using technology is like the most important thing for language acquisition. Um, you know, uh, People who have not been able to be around the language to learn it can now have access just through the internet to practice with other people who are thousands of or hundreds of miles away. That's an opportunity that wasn't able to happen before. So I think, with this 21st century culture, we bring Native people to the future when it comes to language, and we're not we are making new words up. We are, how do you say cell phone in Navajo? That wasn't something that our ancestors knew how to say. But even Navajo now, one of the Navajo Nation, what they have done to focus on this was they have dubbed Star Wars: A New Hope into Navajo completely, and it is crazy. So we're learning how to say lightsaber and the Force in Navajo. And for me, those kinds of things, I want that part of my culture. I want science, language, communication. I want all of that as my culture, as well as in my language.
Thank you, Meg. Thanks so much. Now I want to have the same question for Leone. So how is language important to culture?
Like both Meg and Michael said, especially without language, there is no culture. Without culture, there is no language. And that's so true, because we saw in Hawaii, even within the Pacific nations, in Aotearoa as well as Tahiti, with colonialism, at least I can speak for Hawaii, as far back as in 1896, when Hawaiians were actually told you can't speak Hawaiian in their homeland. And so with that, we almost lost the language, and it diminished the culture as well. And so now with revitalization of the language, and it's been at least maybe going close to 50 years, I believe, if I'm doing my math correctly, we have a new generation. And so it's important for us to not make up new words, but it's important with the language to be literate and to not just make up words and turn them into words that are English words that sound Hawaiian. to actually use a word, or with these new terms that are coming up, lightsaber or social media. If you're literate in the language, you can come up with a word correctly that can fit what that term is that we're seeing. And so language is evolving as well, culture is evolving as well, but it's important that you have both that are working hand in hand correctly and appropriately, so that both language and culture can live. Mahalo.
Yeah, thank you, Leone. So I just want to add something like to all of your um, thinking or your idea. So for example, like the culture and language is very interrelated. For example, same nodding, like if you nod this way or you nod this way, in different culture you have yes and no. So if you don't know that, so maybe you say like you want to die and you do wrong nod, then you'll die, right? Because it's very, very important, like culture, because some country this is no, some country this is no. So is one of the like very important aspect. So for example, I'm from Bangladesh, and even like for the restroom or washroom or toilet, so they have different meaning in different culture, and people use different names to it. So without knowing those culture, is very, very difficult to communicate. And given another example, so for example, if you offer someone in here and offer something and people say thank you, that means they say no actually. They don't want to have that food, or they don't want to have that offer. But in our culture, thank you means, oh, I'm okay with it, right? So it's very difficult. If you don't know the culture, same thank you might be different, same nodding might be different. So it's very important to know culture and language. Those are interrelated, and they're just interbuilt each other. So that's all about my response. Like I want to go for next question, which is how do or did you reclaim the mother tongue? So I want to start from question like that question with Meg. Uh, can you answer that question? Like
Yeah,
Meg?
sure. I think for myself, there's only one native speaker in my home who went through some horrific trauma regarding his language. He was beaten as a kid if he spoke it. And so, and also along with that, because I'm not going to blame the United States government, but the United States government created a culture where native languages were not as good as English languages. And with that came a lot of shame. If you speak that language, you as a person are not as good. And so I think a lot of that is learning at what trauma looks like for generations. Why did it have to look like that at all? And then also realize, you're not that disconnected from that trauma. It's only been one generation for me, for my people to be in that situation where they would get beaten, where they would get hurt if they spoke the language, if they would be called stupid if they spoke this language. And then you can really internalize that. You can really say, I don't know the language, and that's a good thing. But I think what's important in reclaiming the language is just learning how the language can be used to express yourself, to share, to give emotion. I think the greatest example of what my people's language was used for was during World War II. It was used as a code and allies against Japan and Germany. And it was a code that was unbroken. So it is one of the only codes in American history that was unbroken to this day. And the people that were in charge of it, that were, in charge of this language, they were not honored when they were done. That is exactly after we used our language to save the entire world. Literally, our language saved the entire world because it was used in Iwo Jima. And that was the battle that really turned the war for America. And so even after that, it was still, you're dumb if you use that, you're stupid, you know, you should be shamed to use that language. That's not true. So I think a way of reclaiming your language is learning all of the amazing things that it can do, the ways that you can express yourself, even if you don't know how to yet. One thing, my grandma speaks solely Navajo, and I have conversations with her to my extent of my Navajo and her extent of her English, and we communicate. But I just crave being able to communicate with her deeper. I want to know how she feels. I want to know what she, you know, thinks without a translator there. And that is my motivation. I can't do that with my grandma and probably won't be able to, but my children will be able to do that with their grandparents. And my kids will also be able to speak that with me. Like, that is a goal. So that is kind of, I think, reclaiming is to, you know, see what has been broken and connecting it again. And then also having pride in what your language can accomplish, because all of our languages have amazing histories and have amazing things that have helped our peoples get through like the roughest times.
Yeah, thank you, Meg, for your explanations. And next, I need to go with Michael. Can you answer how do or did we claim our mother tongue?
Thanks, Sayeed. I've been thinking a lot about this question, to be honest, when you send it to us. We talk a lot about in our domain of deaf studies, we talk a lot about deafness being a generation sick. Genealogically, if you think about it that way, I'm the only deaf person of my family. My parents are not deaf. My siblings are not deaf. And so I come to language in a different way, maybe than some others do. My parents were not models of the language that I use for me. I pass that on to my children, much like Meg talked about with her children. So genealogically speaking, I'm the first in my family. I am my own mother language. I am my own mother tongue. And that's a little more complicated, a little more layered. It gets much more complicated when we talk about other people within our community, where they learn language from, where they're exposed to language from. Where many people are exposed to their native language from their families, there are many people in the deaf community who are not. I think perhaps with the exception maybe of families where deaf children have deaf parents and where they learn that language or are exposed to that language at birth, a large percentage of deaf children in our community, that's not the case for them. So it's caused me to rethink again and again about how deaf people acquire language, how they actually acquire their mother tongue. I was exposed to sign language my entire life. I have a cousin who was deaf. However, I didn't interact with other people at school. I didn't interact with others who used American Sign Language in a way that we have mother tongue. It wasn't until really high school that I started to be exposed to adults and other peers in that way. So really how much our environment places us in positions to be exposed to native language, that's really essential, but it's also really diverse in our community. So what does it mean to reclaim a language that maybe I never had or that I'm coming into? That's probably a little different than how people reclaim spoken languages. I think that's probably a little different. So for me, I've had to seek that out as an adult. I've had to be outside of my family to refine and reclaim my own mother tongue. So anyway, that's a little different experience than perhaps other people have had, but I think that gives you a good lens in our community and how we acquire language.
Thank you, Michael. What is your thoughts on this, on Leone?
So really quickly, like I mentioned earlier, I'm Hawaiian, Samoan, Chinese, German. And if you look at all four languages, all except Hawaiian would be considered a living language. Didn't lose the language. It's, if you're in that country, it's the first language spoken. And so why Hawaiian? Well, number one, I grew up in Hawaii and I'm from Hawaii. So that's might be a little bit obvious. And because I had the opportunity. I think back at least when I was in high school back in the 80s, 90s, in high schools and even up till today, Hawaiian language is not offered in all schools. Go figure, in the state of Hawaii. That's a whole nother conversation. But in reclaiming my language, the number one industry in Hawaii is tourism. And at the time, the largest, I guess you could say, group of people that were visiting Hawaii were from Japan. And so when I went into high school, my friends and I were all, gung-ho to start learning Japanese, excuse me, so that we could, I don't know, be successful in whatever we thought we wanted to do at the time. And so I took Japanese for about 3 years at Kamehameha schools. And then I was part of our choir, our concert glee, and we had the opportunity to represent Hawaii as a delegation in 1990 for the sesquicentennial commemoration of the Tiriti o Waitangi, the Waitangi Treaty in Aotearoa. And while we were going and learning all types of protocols, and our student leaders had to get up and speak on behalf of the students. Some of them, because they were taking Hawaiian through Kamehameha, they got up and they spoke, and I was a little bit jealous. And so that summer I decided that was the beginning of my reclaiming my language and being part of that movement. At the same time, in my own little community, there was a family who was involved with the Hawaiian language immersion schools, which were just beginning, kind of into the late 80s. So it was a few years, at least almost 5 years since Hawaiian language was introduced in a preschool setting, and then later on in an elementary school setting. And this little family in my church organization, I would watch them and listen to them, and I was inspired by them. So all of this happened at once. And so I, at the time, right before graduation, decided that I wanted to be a teacher of said schools. And didn't quite work out that way. Eventually I had my family and my oldest child. And then the opportunity presented itself to me in my community, because the movement was gaining momentum, but in town. And if you're from Hawaii, I come from country, and I'm about an hour drive away from town, and I wasn't willing to make the drive at the time. So fortunately, the program came to my community, and that's where my journey started in reclaiming my mother tongue, being part of that movement, having my children be part of the movement as well. And so here I am today, and doing the best that I can to still help others reclaim our mother tongue.
Thank you, Leone. I think it's a great explanations. So I think it's very important questions, and we answer all of those questions very quickly. And now our next important question is, how has mainstream America appropriated your language? So I want to start that question with Michael. So can you explain, Michael, how the mainstream America appropriated your language?
I'm sorry, Sayeed, could you repeat which number question that was? The interpreter couldn't hear.
Yeah, how has mainstream America appropriated your language? Number 4 question.
Okay, number 4, just a second. I was looking at the wrong one. Hold on here. Where do we start here? Honestly, where do I actually start with an answer for this? I could go on for a long time about this one. There are a host of reasons here.
Make it small and like a sweet.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I know we're up against time. So American Sign Language, like other sign languages in other countries, it's become rather trendy, if I can put it that way. It's become rather fashionable to sign in the last couple of years. Everyone seems to want to learn signs. However, it's of very little benefit to their own local communities. We try and draw an example here. Here in the US, and I'm speaking at large here, American Sign Language has become a bit of a cash cow for universities. A lot of money is made off of students who are interested in learning American Sign Language. The Modern Language Association has recognized that ASL is one of the highest enrolled languages at universities across the country. However, the MLA and university communities don't often give back to the deaf community, to the language community. It feels a little appropriated. That's just one example. Another example, if I can, give me a second here. Another example we see is baby signs. It's not really a sign language. It's kind of a code that mothers and infants use to communicate very simple concepts with one another. And there's a lot of research and there's a lot of discussion about how baby sign language helps children learn language quicker because they're visual at that age. They haven't developed a spoken language yet. They're still working on their own fine motor skills at that point. And so a gestural language for a baby seems pretty natural and seems to be working well. However, when we hear about babies who are deaf, or when we hear about other people who are deaf and want to learn a sign language because we think it'll help their cognition, that seems to be frowned upon. And in many cases, it's actually heavily frowned upon. The children go through audio training, they go through speech therapy in order to succeed in a hearing world. I'm using air quotes to designate hearing there. And so we're looking at the soul, again, as I used that concept before, the very soul of our language is being appropriated by places within America, by movements within America. This is a really short answer. I could go on for another hour. Really, where do I start with this?
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. So now I'm going to go with Meg. Can you please share your thoughts? Yeah.
I'm going to share two important dates for people. One is 1958 and the other one is 1978. So 1958 for Utah was the year that all Native people could vote. So 1958, okay? The almost last state in the Union, which really shows how Native people were viewed in society. They were not included in society at all, okay? 1978 was the year that was passed the Native American Religious Freedom Act. So this basically allowed Native people to reclaim their religions, their spirituality, their customs, their culture, including, gathering medicine, hunting, fishing. All of these things were illegal until 1978. You would be thrown in federal jail if you were found to do ceremonies in our language. So, when we're talking about how America has, appropriated or taken control over language, the idea to do that was because America needed the land. And the easiest way to get to the land was to remove the people. And the easiest way to remove the people was just like what we saw in Bengali and what the Pakistan video you showed us, which was attack the language. So those two dates are super important for people to understand that these things that happened a long time ago did not happen a long time ago. And we're feeling the effects today still. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do, but we're here.
Yeah, thank you, Meg. And what are your thoughts on Leone, like on this question?
That's interesting, May, because in 1978 at the Hawaii Constitutional Convention is when the Hawaiian language in this, I won't even use state of Hawaii, the Hawaiian language in Hawaii became the second official language of Hawaii. So interesting fact there. But like Michael said, I can go on and on with this as well. Hula, let's just put that out there, but we're talking language. So I'm just going to give one quick example, and nothing to do with the government per se, because we can go on and on about that as well. But just one tangible current example is the word poke. Poke basically is basically just chunks, diced squared chunks. And so I learned that as a person who had to learn Hawaiian language. But growing up, I thought poke was the actual dish, which is the raw fish dish, which is diced up, but fish. But I thought the whole dish was called poke, and it was related to fish, which it's not. You can have poke kalo, poke wala, but this one is the ia poke. And so going back to appropriation, or maybe misappropriation, is I believe there was a company in Chicago, maybe a year or two ago, just recently, that patented the word poke. And so a lot of companies in Hawaii got cease and desist, excuse me if I don't know the term, letters because they used the word. Now, poke is used all over Hawaii. And so for some Chicago company, and I can't remember, but a Chicago company, which I believe did not necessarily have ties to Hawaii. Usually when you walk into a poke store, that person either is Hawaiian or grew up in Hawaii and is Hawaiian by nationality. And so that's what you expect, but I don't know if this company had it, but they actually patented the word. I don't remember the outcome, but that's just one example of kind of where that's not the only example of patenting a native language for making a buck, a lot of bucks, I'm pretty sure. And so that's just one example of misappropriating our language.
Yeah,
And
thank you so much, Leone. Like, actually, we are out of time, but we have to go like two more questions. Maybe we'll make it very short and simple, like 2-3 sentences. Like, next question was, what barriers do you face with our own mother tongue? So I can start with few explanations. Like, for example, I'm from Bangladesh. My native language is Bengali, but I'm not as good as in English compared to I'm as good as Bengali. And because I start learning English at the age of like 18 or 19, but people who born here, they start learning at the age of 0, right? So we already have some barriers to communicate, and people sometimes complain about our accent, but if you ask the same questions, they can talk in Bengali, maybe their accent is different, uh, because we all have to think of like putting our feet in other shoes, then understand how they have so many barriers when they're learning different languages. So if you all think that way, then you can understand everybody's like aspect of it. Otherwise, like maybe my English accent is difficult or maybe it's bad, then people can laugh at me. But if I ask the same question them like to talk in Bengali, maybe we can laugh at them too. So we all should not like we should respect each other, and maybe we can put our feet in other shoes and think about how they did that. So it's how they did up to that point. So I have the same questions with like a Meg now, and it will be very short and simple because we have out of time.
Absolutely. Navajo, Denebizod, is one of the hardest languages in the world to learn. I don't know how they came up with that. It's the hardest, but it's tonal. It's the way the sounds are made. It's very precise. If you say one thing differently, it's off. A barrier that I think a lot of people that are learning languages is they don't want to sound stupid, and they don't want to sound like they're they don't sound Navajo, or they have a different accent. I speak Spanish with a Samoan accent. I speak Navajo with a Bilagana accent. That's just how it has to be when we're learning a language. There's muscle memory in your face. With Michael, I'm sure it's with your body. The more you practice, the better you will become. And so a barrier is just trying to make sure that that's a priority. Every day, speak or use the language in a good way.
Thank you, Meg. Leone.
Literature is one. And so we in Hawaii don't have a lot of printed literature, especially current literature in the Hawaiian language. We've come a long way, and we have some wonderful artists that are producing literature. Well, now in today's world, it's way more visual since we have all this technology at our hands. But literature and resources is one barrier that we have always had. It's gotten much, much better. At one point, Hawaii was very literate, but with the ban of the language, just within 3 generations, we've lost that. So literature and access to our own printed literature, kind of morphing now into visual, is one barrier.
Yeah, Michael.
These are great answers, and this is actually a really great question. In the world that is designed, the world that we're in is designed for hearing people. It's just a fact that deaf people have to adjust to that, and therefore, nearly everything they do is a barrier. Just sitting at the dinner table and participating in a conversation that is vocal is incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging. That's a barrier. This desire to understand others and be understood, that's missing. We often call this the dinner table syndrome, where it's incredibly difficult or challenging or impossible to participate in a dinner table conversation. That's a huge barrier, and that's just in the home. We're not talking about church, we're not talking about school, we're not talking about healthcare, we're not talking about architecture, we're not talking about the office culture, we're not talking about the courtroom, we're talking about just the home with dinner table syndrome. That situation is designed to exclude people who can't hear, to exclude deaf people who use a visual language. Obviously, that leads to much bigger barriers in society. Obviously, education becomes a factor there, where people acquire language, where people acquire their culture. If we're looking at the laws and policies and the financial policies that we all follow, if we're looking at areas of rehabilitation, it forces deaf people to have to find ways to adjust and match that particular setting rather than the other way around. It's much, much more difficult to be an authentic and genuine person when you're all the time trying to have to fit situations that are not designed for you. The rehab area is a huge other barrier within our community too. I'll end with that.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Like we have last question. We have like how we can put it our own language. Can we just go for one line, one sentence, because we're out of time? We would just say one sentence, how we can protect our language. And with that question, we can end our event. Michael, you can go first.
Yeah, I'm just distilling my answer here. Sorry to take just a moment. How we protect our language
Yes.
is we empower its users. We need to have role models of language. We need to have identity models. We need to have language models. We need to empower people who use that language. My needs are human. I'm an emotional being. I feel. I have desires that are human. I dream just like everybody else does. That doesn't make me any more special than anybody else. When we remove this idea of being as special, wow, our needs really are human. We have a need to connect with one another. That's how we protect language. So how do we protect language? We empower its users. In order for me to thrive and for others to thrive, I have to be empowered to use my own language. That's, in all honesty, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be alive. I probably would be dead reviewing the events of my life, because I didn't have an opportunity in important places of my life to build that social structure and to have that network and to have an identity development time for myself. Sign language has provided me a way to reconnect and to thrive in my own life. It's actually saved my life.
Yeah.
Without that, I wouldn't be here. So again, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Michael. And I think like Leone and like Meg, you want to say one sentence?
Yeah, I'll just quickly, I was, thinking what Michael said, protect the people, but and empower them, but also remember that we need to protect Mother Earth, the rivers, the lakes, the mountains. That is our culture. We are, as we cannot disconnect language and culture, we cannot disconnect ourselves from the land and the importance that the land has on our language and our culture.
Thank you. Leone?
Learn the language, learn it and learn it correctly. Use it as much as you can. Make corrections when others are not using it correctly, and defend it and fight for it, just like they did in Pakistan. Is that correct, Sayeed?
Yeah, thank you, Leone. So I think we are out of time today, and like the concluding, like, thank you so much for this meaningful conversation. And I think next year we can make it like in person, hopefully, and make it big. And I just want to say something in our language, like in our national anthem, we say Amar Sonar Bangla, Ami Tomai Bhalobashi. This is the Bengali language. The meaning is my golden Bengali, I love you. And thank you so much. And in Bengali is Dhonnobad. And now I want to give like Baldomero to conclude this event.
Yes, thank you very much to all of you, to the four of you that have actually participated in this program so beautifully, for your insights. English is my third language, and so I totally understand what we're talking about. I could be speaking as well. I also want to thank both interpreters. Thank you very much for your support and your understanding. That was outstanding. And I'm just grateful that we had this system, this virtual system, that we are able to connect and proceed and celebrate, because today is International Mother Language Day, and what a beautiful way to celebrate this day. And as you mentioned, Sayeed, I look forward to having this on an annual basis and to engage in this conversation more and more. I think that will bring us even more together. So thanks to all of you and all the individual that has been following these proceedings via Facebook, and they'll be able to rewatch them again and view it on their YouTube channel that we also have. Just for your information, tomorrow we'll be having a global dialogue with Dr. Carl Bowman. He's the director of all dual language programs throughout the state of Utah. He's in the Board of Education. And on Wednesday, we'll have another panel on the Sustainable Development Goal number 9 on industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And our panelists will be Dr. Norm Wright, the Dean of the School of Business, Professor Dr. Maritza Sotomayor, she's an international economist, and also Mr. Ben Collender from the city of Salt Lake. He's the Director of Economic Development for the city. If you want to see all the other programs that we have or previous videos, just access our website at uvu.edu/global. Thank you very much. for your participation. And Sayeed, you want to make a final comment?
Yeah, I just want to play the last video like with a few minutes, 1 minute maybe, and then you can end with that video.
So we will end with the video.
Okay.
Thank you again. Have a wonderful day. Thank you very much for joining us today. Sayeed, you will connect.
Yeah.
Saudara kami terkorban pertumpahan darah 21 Februari. Sejarah yang kami tak lupakan. تيسون بلغتهم ضحوا بحياتهم ب21 شباط مش ممكن ننسى التاريخ Getrennt von den Tränen, 100 Metalle ihre Seele verloren im Februar. Wie kann man es je vergessen? हमरो आफंता को रागात ले रंगे को 21 फेब्रुआरी हामी त्यो दिनलाई भुल्ने कसरी हमारे अपनों के खून से रंगे 21 फरवरी कैसे याद रहना हमारी Nos frères sont tombés ce 21 février et tout ce sang versé jamais je ne l'oublierai Nuestros hermanos caídos que murieron en febrero 21 ¿Cómo olvidarlos? Aman şuna deşirir rohte ragano Februari আমি কি ভুলিতে পারি আমি কি ভুলিতে পারি Наши братья погибли в бою 21 февраля Не можем забыть никогда Our brothers died and blood was shed On the 21st February How can we forget the history? 我们的兄弟在2月20日不幸离水国多离世了，我们怎能忘记呢？Nostri fratelli uccisi e spezzati 21 febbraio non scordiamo la storia
Yeah, I think like that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.